London, 1999. The sky is covered by low clouds, a thick gray that seems endless. On a quiet street in the suburb of Bexley Heath, neighbors watch from their windows. In front of a red brick house, flashes burst like small explosions. Reporters shove microphones forward, lift recorders, murmur names that until that morning no one had dared to say aloud. The door opens. An elderly woman comes out slowly, a shopping bag hanging from her arm and a beige coat that has seen better winters. She walks with a short, unhurried step. Her eyes, behind the round lenses of thin-rimmed glasses, seem more curious than frightened. The journalists swarm around her. "Is it true you worked for the KGB? During the Cold War, why did you do it? Were you a Soviet spy?" The woman stops. For a second, the noise dies. Only the click of a camera remains. She looks up, takes in the swarm of anxious faces, and smiles, with the calm of someone who has nothing left to hide. "I only did what I thought was right." Her voice is firm, without a tremor. There's no apology, no defiance, only conviction. The journalists look at one another. None knows how to continue. There is no fear, no guilt, no trace of remorse in that woman who, according to the newly declassified reports, had been one of the longest-serving spies in Soviet history. While the flashes keep firing, the image freezes. Time rewinds. The photographs turn into archival images, columns of smoke rising over Hiroshima, the glare of an explosion in the Nevada desert, Stalin watching from his office, Churchill speaking of the Iron Curtain, scientists in laboratories sealed by steel doors. A serene voice carries through those invisible images. Sometimes the longest wars are not fought with weapons, but with papers. And sometimes the decisions that change the world are made in silence, behind a desk. In a modest London office, a young woman reviews reports, copies formulas, and files documents in brown folders. No one looks twice when she walks by. No one suspects. She has the unremarkable look of a secretary, the discreet gait of one more employee. But inside those papers are secrets that can tilt the planet's balance of power. That woman is Melita Norwood, and for 40 years she will lead a double life. To her neighbors, she will be a kind wife, a calm mother, an avid gardener. To the KGB, she will be the West's most constant and quiet source of nuclear information. Her story begins long before this gray morning of 1999. It begins in an England in crisis, in a time when ideals weighed more than flags and loyalty could wear more than one face. Because treason, as the 20th century would discover, is never painted only in black or white. The year was 1912. In a small town on England's south coast, Folkestone, Dorset, Melita Stedman was born, the only child of an unlikely marriage, an exiled Latvian typesetter and an English schoolteacher. Her father, Alexander Stedman, had fled the Russian Empire after taking part in workers' protests. In London, he had found work at a union print shop, and from there, he wrote pamphlets in defense of workers and against the czars. Her mother, Gertrude, taught in a public school, convinced that education was the only real path to equality. The family lived modestly in a small house full of books. In the sitting room, there were more papers than furniture. The neighbors considered them a strange family. They talked about politics at dinner, about strikes and rights, about a world without kings or bosses. Melita grew up hearing those conversations as naturally as other children heard bedtime stories. Her father taught her to read in English and Russian, and by the age of 6, she could already decipher the headlines of Soviet newspapers that arrived by post. Nights at the Stedmans were different. There were no prayers before bed, but debates. Alexander spoke with passion about the revolution that would one day transform the world, and his daughter looked at him with the admiration of one who listens to a prophet. "Justice will not come on its own, Melita," he told her as he sat her on his knees. "You must build it with your hands, even if you get them dirty." She nodded, not fully understanding, but memorizing every word. When the war broke out in 1914, Alexander was singled out as a suspect for his foreign ideas. They watched him, interrogated him, sidelined him. The girl understood then that convictions could carry a price. 2 years later, her father fell ill with tuberculosis and died in a public hospital in London. He was 40 years old. The loss left an indelible mark. Her mother, in mourning, put Alexander's old notes and articles into a wooden box. Before closing the lid, Melita took one of the pamphlets and tucked it among her school notebooks. On the cover was a line she would remember all her life: "The world belongs to those who work for it." Her father's death did not weaken her ideals. It turned them into an inheritance. Gertrude, pragmatic and strong, taught her how to survive in a society that despised dreamers but never forbade her to dream. "Your father was not wrong," she told her one afternoon, folding laundry. "He was just born before his time." In the years that followed, young Melita learned that poverty and dignity were not opposites. She studied hard on scholarship, reading Marx and Shelley with the same fervor. For her, the words solidarity and justice were not theories, they were duties. At 12, in a notebook, she wrote a sentence that foreshadowed her destiny: "I will follow the cause, no matter what." That promise, written in school ink, would outlast wars, ideologies, and empires. For Melita Norwood, socialism was not a political option, but a family inheritance, almost a religion. And it would be that quiet faith, born in a house full of old books, that would guide her for the rest of her life, even when the world chose to call her a traitor. During the 1920s, Melita Stedman moved through the gray districts of a London that had not yet recovered from the war. Money was scarce, and strikes were the only language workers felt heard. In that atmosphere, the girl, now a teenager, developed a precocious sensitivity to injustice. In 1929, she gained entry to University College London on a modest scholarship to study languages and economics. There she discovered a world much wider than her childhood one. Between walls covered with protest posters and cafes where intellectuals and exiles mingled, she found her new family, young British Marxists. The financial collapse of that year seemed to confirm everything her father had preached: closed banks, empty factories, queues of the unemployed. For her, capitalism was not a concept. It was the image of her mother counting coins to pay for heating. At night, she attended reading circles where texts by Marx, Engels, and Gorky were discussed. In those gatherings, she met Hilary Nussbaum, a physicist with a calm temperament and unshakable faith in Soviet science. He spoke of progress, of a classless world, she of justice. They married in 1935, and together began to see politics not as an ideal, but as a daily duty. As Europe hurtled toward chaos, Melita became convinced that communism was not just an economic theory, but a vaccine against fascism. The news from Germany, the rise of Hitler, the book burnings, the concentration camps, confirmed her deepest fear: that the free world was incapable of stopping evil on its own. In 1936, she volunteered as a translator for organizations sending aid to the Spanish Republic. That experience marked her. Each letter from the front reinforced her conviction that the Soviet Union was the only real wall against barbarism. After finishing university, she obtained a post as a secretary in a metal research association. At first glance, it was just another administrative job, drafting reports, filing records, organizing meetings. But Melita knew that the future's secrets were hidden in those papers. Among laboratory experiments and visits from American scientists, she heard for the first time an expression that intrigued her: tube alloys. She did not exactly understand what it meant, but her instinct told her this was not something to discuss. Every afternoon, leaving work, she walked alone through London's tram-smoked streets. Sometimes she stopped at newsstands and read headlines about Stalin's purges, famines, and denunciations. She did not deny them, but rationalized them with the same logic others use to accept the bombing of enemy cities. Every revolution has its price. In her 1938 diary, she wrote a brief line: "Good does not always wear innocence. Sometimes it wears a disguise to survive." That same year, she was invited to a discreet meeting in a Bloomsbury flat. Among those present were students, journalists, workers, a couple of foreigners with Slavic accents. They talked about science, politics, and the duty to share knowledge. One of them, A man in a gray suit watched her in silence. When they said goodbye, he spoke in a neutral tone. "You believe in justice, Mrs. Norwood. Remember that justice also needs messengers." She did not know it yet, but that encounter had set in motion a chain that would last 40 years. Melita Norwood did not become a spy overnight. It was a slow, almost imperceptible process, born from a mix of moral conviction and historical disillusionment. For her, loyalty was not a matter of passport, but of balance. If one country concentrated the power of the atom, it should share it with the other. That was her logic. And in the end, that logic would lead her to the best-kept secret of the 20th century. In 1937, Melita Norwood found work in an unremarkable building on Euston Road, headquarters of the British Non-Ferrous Metals Research Association. The walls were covered with diagrams and chemical formulas. The air smelled of metal and ink. For a young woman with language studies and training in economics, it was a modest but secure position. Writing minutes, typing reports, filing scientific correspondence. Every morning she arrived punctually, took off her wool gloves, and sat at her Underwood typewriter. The clatter of the keys set the rhythm of her day, a discrete music that accompanied the calculations of engineers and metallurgists. On the surface, her work seemed routine. But that laboratory, hidden among ordinary offices, was not only studying industrial alloys. In the basements, they were experimenting with compounds of uranium and beryllium, materials little understood at the time, whose strange density and capacity to release energy had drawn the interest of the Ministry of Supply. Without knowing it at first, Melita worked on a piece of the secret program that would later be called tube alloys, the embryo of the British atomic project. Scientists passed her desk leaving memos with cryptic titles: gaseous diffusion, limits of metallic purity, heat of fission. She filed every sheet carefully, but read each paragraph. Her memory was precise, almost photographic. She realized that what was being discussed there was not theory, but the future of war. One afternoon, while she waited for the tram, an acquaintance from the British Communist Party approached to greet her. He was a young man with a foreign accent, a new-looking dark coat, and a smile that did not quite match his eyes. "I've heard you work somewhere interesting," he said. "I'm only a secretary," Melita answered with a modest shrug. He nodded like someone who already knows the answer. "We only want to understand how they work over there. Nothing. Illegal. Open information?" She said nothing. The tram arrived, the doors closed, and the remark hung in the air like an unspoken promise. Over the following months, small encounters repeated: a conversation in a Bloomsbury cafe, a walk in the park, a letter with no return address containing technical questions disguised as scientific curiosity. Melita never spoke of those contacts with her husband or her office colleagues. In her mind, she did not see herself as a spy, but as a mediator. She believed that sharing certain data was not betrayal, but balance. In a world preparing for war, she thought no nation should possess absolute power. Espionage, if it could be called that, began without announcement, oath, or training. It was an almost natural transition, from secretary to witness, from witness to messenger. Her desk became the frontier between secrecy and conviction. Every afternoon, before leaving, she turned off the lamp and put the papers away in the metal files. In the laboratory's silence, the echo of her steps sounded among steel tables. She knew that what was discussed there could change the world's fate. What she did not yet know was that, bit by bit, that fate was beginning to pass through her hands. During the darkest years of the war, London became a board of shadows. Every night, the roar of German bombers covered the sky, and the sirens drove everyone to shelters. The city's lights were ordered off, and in that controlled darkness, Melita kept to her routine. Arrive at work, arrange reports, type names the rest of the country would never hear. In the laboratory, conversations had grown more cautious. Men spoke in whispers, and documents bore state-secret stamps. Melita now understood the scope of what she handled: theories about chain reactions, calculations of critical mass, layouts of laboratories working in parallel with the Americans. She knew they were building a new kind of weapon. Each sheet that passed through her hands was a piece of the future, and the future, to her, should not belong to one side alone. Outside the office, the war surrounded her. She walked streets covered in dust among collapsed buildings, pockets full of papers that could cost her life if anyone searched her. Sometimes, hearing the distant hum of bombs, she thought about the absurdity of it all, millions dying to decide which flag would fly over the ruins. One afternoon in 1943, after work, she crossed the park in Bexley Heath. She had arranged to meet a man who said he represented a group of sympathizers for peace. He wore a gray hat and carried a briefcase. He looked like any anonymous civil servant. They greeted each other with a slight nod and walked a few steps together. Melita took an envelope from inside her coat. Inside were copies of reports about new metallic materials used in atomic research. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear of arrest, but from awareness of the moment. "I'm not doing it for money," she said before handing him the envelope. The man looked at her closely. "Then why?" she answered without hesitation. "Because peace needs balance." The exchange lasted less than a minute. Neither looked back. For her, it was not an act of treason, but of prevention. She was convinced that sharing that information did not endanger the United Kingdom, but prevented any nation, even her own, from wielding atomic power unopposed. From then on, every classified document that passed across her desk took on a different weight. It was no longer just work. It was responsibility. She copied pages at day's end with the care of someone preparing an offering. In the distant wail of the air raid sirens, she found a kind of moral justification. If the world could be destroyed by a bomb, someone had to prevent that bomb from belonging to a single country. That conviction became her refuge. In her mind, there was no moral dilemma, only a simple equation: equilibrium or extermination. She believed knowledge had to be shared, even if the price was betrayal. That certainty would accompany her all her life, stronger than any flag and more durable than the war itself. Between 1943 and 1945, while the continent burned and armies shifted from front to front, the secret war was fought in laboratories and offices. Melita Norwood kept working at the British Non-Ferrous Metals Research Association, but her desk had become an invisible doorway between two worlds. The documents that passed through her hands spoke of increasingly specific subjects: the production of enriched uranium, the development of gaseous diffusion systems, the creation of new materials to withstand extreme temperatures. London and Washington were working together in a project that would soon receive a definitive name: Manhattan. But very few knew that information was also traveling east in sealed envelopes that vanished without a trace. Melita did not use cameras or microphones. She copied the reports by hand or on her old typewriter with precise, almost mechanical lettering. Then she delivered the papers or microfilms in parks or train stations, following simple instructions. Her contacts changed every few months, and she never asked names. A password, a banal phrase, a literary quote, a flower's color, was enough to confirm a messenger's identity. In Moscow, the KGB gave her the code name Hola. The nickname sounded casual, almost ironic, but it fit her exact role: a discreet voice that spoke little and delivered much. Internal reports described her as a source of exceptional reliability, not motivated by financial compensation. In return, she received small gifts: Russian books, handkerchiefs, Georgian tea, never money. While the Allies celebrated victories in Europe, a group of Soviet scientists led by Igor Kurchatov worked at a secret facility near Moscow. They had fragments of information, loose, pieces that did not fit until Hola's reports began to arrive. British notes on alloys, diffusion diagrams, reactor specifications all helped complete the puzzle. Kurchatov did not know her name, but in his memoranda he thanked our foreign sources for the decisive advance. Melita knew her reports had a destination, though she would never see it. She sent them with the same methodical gesture with which she signed a letter or closed a drawer. She did not experience it as conspiracy, but as a secret form of cooperation among equals. If everyone possesses the same power, she thought, no one will dare to use it. In 1949, when the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb at the Semipalatinsk test site, the entire world was jolted. In London and Washington, the intelligence services were bewildered. How had they advanced so quickly? No one imagined that, deep in a file room on Euston Road, a soft-voiced secretary with perfect manners had helped sheet by sheet to shorten the distance between the two powers. While newspapers headlined, "The USSR reaches nuclear parity," Melita watered the plants in her garden, serving tea as every afternoon. In her small personal notebook, she wrote a single sentence: "Equilibrium has begun." In the years after the war, Melita Norwood blended into English normality. Her life was a succession of harmless routines: the garden, tea at 5, short chats with neighbors about the weather or shopping. From the outside, she seemed one of those women the British post-war had molded: orderly, calm, predictably modest. At work, colleagues described her with the same adjectives: kind, efficient, discreet. No one suspected that in her handbag, between her purse and a notebook, she might carry documents worth more than any gold bar. Every few weeks, Melita left the office a bit early. She walked to a discreet park where a bench by a hedge had become her meeting point. She placed a carefully sealed envelope inside a folded newspaper, sat for a few minutes watching the pigeons, and then left unhurried. That was her entire visible role in the invisible war beginning, the Cold War. In the Kremlin, reports signed by Hola kept arriving with British precision. Each contained technical information about industrial, energy, or metallurgical advances. They were fragments that, added to hundreds of other reports, formed a steady intelligence network. In Moscow, KGB officers considered her a model agent, silent, disciplined, absolutely convinced. No tape recorders, no microphones, no disguises, only paper and conviction. Comments in Soviet offices were sometimes mocking. "The enemy thinks we are dangerous," one handler would say. "He has no idea our best ally is a housewife." They laughed. But in that laughter hid a deep error, underestimating the enemy and ignoring the power of invisibility. Meanwhile, in London, MI5 was recovering from the trauma of war. The new intelligence agencies looked for spies among Cambridge-educated men: diplomats, military officers, scientists. Melita, with her domestic appearance and gentle manners, fell outside any suspicion. She did not drink to excess, did not travel abroad, did not speak politics in public. She was invisible, and she knew it. At home, her husband Hillary asked few questions. He shared her ideas, but not her acts. She preferred not to burden him with secrets. The marriage was an island of routine on a sea of global tensions. In the Bexley Heath garden, as they tended the flowers, they spoke of philosophy, of books, of hope for a more just world. No one would have imagined that the woman watering roses had quietly helped build the bomb that now kept the planet divided. The 1940s faded, along with the innocence of a war won. The planet split into two blocks, and fear became a permanent condition. Amid that climate of global suspicion, Melita Norwood kept being exactly what the world needed her to appear: an ordinary woman. Every everyday gesture, hanging laundry, paying a bill, greeting the postman, was part of her perfect camouflage. No one looks twice at someone who seems unimportant, and in that invisibility, Hola kept passing to the other side of the curtain the secrets that would maintain the balance of terror. No one watched her, no one questioned her, and that, for her, was the real victory. The 1950s turned the world into a stage of overlapping shadows. Newspapers carried names that shamed British secret services: Philby, Burgess, McLean, Blunt, the famed Cambridge Five. Elegant traders, cultured men toasting in Mayfair clubs while sending documents to the Kremlin. Espionage became a masculine spectacle of scandals and defections. But behind those headlines, far from the front pages, another quieter network spread. Faceless, nameless women scattered across offices, embassies, and laboratories, sustaining the machinery of secrecy. They were the typists who copied encrypted reports, the interpreters who translated diplomatic messages, the archivists who classified files. In a time when men ruled intelligence and politics, women moved along the margins, invisible by design, ignored by habit. That invisibility, which for centuries had been a limitation, became their best disguise. Melita Norwood was part of that silent army. No one would have compared her with the celebrated Cambridge traitors. She had no connections, no ambitions, no diplomatic contacts. She was a domestic figure, a common face in an unremarkable office, and precisely for that reason, her access was deeper than many professional spies. No one monitored secretaries. No one imagined that a woman who made tea and filed reports could change the course of history. In Moscow, the KGB grasped the value of that bias before anyone else. Her handler summed it up in a phrase that would circulate years later in an internal report. She is invisible because the world underestimates her. Female operatives became a deliberate tactic. In the West, officers hunted traitors among men of influence. Meanwhile, women like Melita kept passing information under the strongest cover of all: normality. In KGB files, her profile was studied as the example of an ideal source: discreet, disciplined, without personal motives, with firm ideology. She needed neither training nor surveillance. Her life did the work. In London, the British services did not learn the lesson. Suspicions kept pointing at high officials, scientists, or diplomats. Class and gender bias shielded people like Melita. She was Mrs. Norwood, with a kind voice and plain clothes, a tidy garden, and unchanging habits. Not even the very system that had formed her could imagine that an act of espionage might be born of moral conviction, and even less from a woman who neither smoked nor raised her voice. As the world split between Washington and Moscow, Melita remained at her desk, copying reports with her usual calm. At home, her life unfolded in almost liturgical repetition, cooking dinner, balancing the accounts, writing letters to relatives. At night, she sometimes read foreign newspapers sent by her contacts, comparing how each side told the same news. She knew both lied, and that convinced her even more that her role was necessary. The sexism of her time, the same that relegated her to a secondary function, became her shield. She did not need to hide. The world hid her for her. In that paradox lay her power. And so, for years, the most improbable figure in Soviet intelligence kept working from a small London office, invisible, harmless, and to the KGB, perfectly effective. As the years passed, the world changed faces, and Melita changed with it. The war was behind them, battlefields had become laboratories, and the threat no longer came from the sky, but from atoms. In the 50s and 60s, Melita Norwood aged slowly along with the empire she had chosen to betray. Her hair turned gray, her hands thinner, but her routine remained identical. The office, tea, the files. Her reports had changed in tone as well. They no longer spoke of bombs or uranium, but of chemical reactions, civilian nuclear energy, industrial production policy. Even so, Moscow still treated them as if they were gold. KGB analysts knew that behind every technical detail could hide a strategic clue. Soviet desks filled folders with her reports. On the cover, a red stamp. Source, Hola. For Melita, espionage was never a career or an obsession. It was one more task, an extension of her daily life. At the office, she answered calls, corrected minutes, served coffee to engineers. No one paid attention to her. No one looked at the back desk. The men debated theories and budgets, sure that the real danger lay in Washington, not in a soft-spoken woman who kept duplicate copies in a leather folder. Inside, she saw herself as something other than a traitor or a spy. In diary pages she kept for years, she wrote, "I was not a spy. I was a messenger." She believed it sincerely. She thought her job was to transmit knowledge between two worlds that without that connection would end up destroying each other. If each side knew what the other was doing, she reasoned, fear would lose some of its force. It was a naive vision, but deeply human. Meanwhile, MI5 kept looking for traitors in the wrong places. The great British espionage scandals, the Cambridge men, the vanished diplomats, the defecting scientists, had convinced investigators that treason always wore a tie. They spied on embassies, traced bank accounts, questioned politicians. No one thought of Mrs. Norwood, who arrived each morning with British punctuality, hung her coat on the rack, and opened the window to air the office. Outside work, her life was a postcard of normality. Walks with her husband Hillary, trips to the market, afternoons reading in her garden. Sometimes, while watering the plants, she thought about the reports she had delivered and what they represented. She did not see herself as an agent of any country, but as a bridge between two views of the world, the ideal and the real. One spoke of justice, the other of power. She lived in between, convinced there could still be a point of balance. The years went on. London prospered, the Cold War became routine, and Melita, now elderly, grew almost invisible even to her superiors. At her same desk, she stacked reports with the same calm as if she were filing her own life. Around her, no one suspected that the greatest secret of British intelligence was still being written in silence, letter by letter, in that forgotten corner of a gray office. In the 1970s, the world grew tense again. The promises of détente that had followed the SALT treaties evaporated amid new crises: industrial espionage, proxy wars, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Cold War, far from cooling, reheated its edges. On the news, missiles returned to center stage. In the streets, marches called for peace. By then, Melita Norwood was already an older woman. Her face had lost the firmness of youth and her step was slower, but her mind remained clear. In her small desk in South London, she still kept folders with notes and documents, traces of a double life that seemed to have receded. Even so, from time to time, she continued her quiet duty: draft a brief report, copy public and technical data, leave an envelope at an agreed spot. Her KGB contacts were now scarce. The agents who had handled her decades earlier were dead, retired, or replaced by a younger generation who considered her a relic. Still, in Moscow offices, they kept filing her reports with respect. Pola was no longer an active source, but a symbolic figure, the living representation of ideological loyalty. For her, espionage was never about frequency, but about faith. In her mind, it was still the same task: share knowledge, prevent any single country from dominating absolute power. Though she knew the Soviet Union was far from the ideal she had imagined in her youth, she clung to the idea of balance. She did not betray out of party loyalty, but out of a private morality. One afternoon, at a neighborhood meeting about international politics, a young man recognized her surname and, half teasing, asked whether she still believed in socialism. She looked at him with the serenity of someone who has seen too many flags pass by. "I believe in justice," she answered, "not in governments." Those present chuckled softly, not realizing that the phrase was more confession than joke. A few weeks later, Melita drafted what would be her last report. It contained nothing crucial: some observations about the development of civilian nuclear energy and comments on British industrial policy. She delivered it, as always, punctually, in a brown envelope that disappeared without a trace. It was the final gesture of a routine that had lasted nearly half a century. In Moscow, the KGB archive added a last note beside her code name: inactive source, honorable. Thus ended the career of the most improbable spy in Soviet history, without ceremony, without rewards, without drama. Only the administrative silence of a bureaucracy that recognized coolly that a person's value could also be measured in constancy. Melita kept living in her same house, tending her garden and reading the newspapers each morning. War kept turning above the world, but she, from her invisible corner, had already done her part. On November 9, 1989, the world changed without warning. On the radio, a trembling voice announced that the Berlin Wall had fallen. The streets of the German capital filled with crowds, with shouts and songs, with hands prying out bricks with the same euphoria one uses to unearth the past. In her Bexley Heath garden, Melita Norwood turned off the hose and stood still, listening. The news reached her in bursts through the cooing of pigeons and the rustle of leaves. The wall that had divided the world for 40 years, and that she, in her silent way, had helped sustain, was collapsing. For the first time, Melita felt her cause turning into ruins. The balance that had guided her entire life shifted into a definitive asymmetry: a victorious West, an exhausted Soviet Union, the end of shared fear. In the days that followed, Berlin filled the news. In the images, young people who had not lived through the war danced on the wall, smashing it with hammers, hugging those who a week earlier had been enemies. Melita watched in silence. Her face showed neither sadness nor joy, only a quiet resignation. She had spent half a century working for a balance no one needed anymore. In London, MI6 and MI5 discreetly celebrated the end of their historic adversary. The word KGB began to sound old, almost archaeological. Young agents spoke of markets, not missiles. The Cold War, they said, was over, but in a subterranean archive in Moscow, under yellowish lights and settled dust, her name was still there. Melita Norwood. Codename Ola. Red stamp Конфиденциально. Действующий источник. Confidential, living source. Her file had survived purges, transfers, and reforms. No one had destroyed it, because no one had prioritized it. A note added in the margin said, "Not remunerated, ideologically steady, moral source." While empires crumbled, she kept living in the same house, with the same coat and the same habits. She never traveled to Moscow, never met those who received her information, nor did she know that, in a metal box beneath the Kremlin, her entire life was summarized in 20 typed pages. In 1991, newspapers announced the Soviet Union's final collapse. Melita heard the news while making breakfast. She said nothing. In a way, it confirmed something she had always known. Ideas survive, governments do not. In the years that followed, her anonymity remained intact. She was one elderly woman among many, invisible among millions. But archives do not stay closed forever. In 1992, a man crossed a border with a briefcase full of documents and the patience of half a century. And with him, the name Melita Norwood began, slowly, to emerge from the dark. In the summer of 1992, a man crossed into the West with a briefcase packed with secrets. His name was Vasily Mitrokhin, a former KGB archivist. For years, he had hand-copied thousands of documents and hidden them in boxes beneath his house's floorboards. When the Soviet Union fell, he decided to take them with him. That paper treasure contained half a century of espionage, names, dates, operations, human sources around the world. The British received him in silence. For months, a team from MI6 and MI5 worked in a secret facility on London's outskirts, classifying the archive's contents. Most cases spoke of spies long dead, forgotten networks, closed operations. But among the yellowed names on the list, one surprised everyone: Melita Norwood. The file contained letters, summaries, and comments from Soviet officers describing her as a reliable and selfless source, active for more than 40 years. On a typed sheet, an officer noted codename Hola, nationality British, profession scientific secretary, motivation ideological. MI5 analysts could not believe it. The woman was still alive, retired, living in a London suburb. She had gone unnoticed all her life. They had never intercepted a call, never tailed her, never suspected. The woman they had considered a simple housewife had outwitted for decades one of the world's most experienced intelligence services. The discovery was uncomfortable. In British government offices, the news was handled with caution. The file climbed slowly up the hierarchy, from analysts to the MI5 director, then to the Home Office in number 10 Downing Street. When it reached the Prime Minister, the dilemma was obvious: prosecute an 80-year-old for treason and expose the ineptitude of the entire British security apparatus, or leave her alone and let history forget her. The final report had a cold, almost bureaucratic tone. Melita Norwood has been identified as a Soviet agent active between 1937 and 1973. The information supplied, though significant in its time, has no current relevance. Legal action is not recommended. The political decision was immediate. Too late to try her, too embarrassing to admit it. The order was clear: keep the case under wraps. But secrets rarely rest where they are told to. In 1999, the Mitrokhin archive became public. Among thousands of names, Melita Norwood's occupied only a few lines, but it was enough to bring her world crashing down. Journalists found her address in hours, while headlines filled the papers. London's granny spy, Stalin's secretary. Melita kept serving tea in her kitchen, as serene as ever. She did not need to deny anything. She had spent her whole life being invisible. Now she had to learn to live under the light. And while the media exhumed her past, the British government kept silent, knowing any word would only make more visible the error it had chosen not to see for 40 years. In September of 1999, the Cold War's best-kept secrets surfaced. British newspapers ran on the front page a story so improbable it seemed a novel. The Bexley Heath granny worked for the KGB for more than 40 years. The news spread with the speed of a revelation and the tone of a scandal. The 87-year-old woman in the photographs, thin, with round glasses and a polite smile, looked nothing like the image of a traitor. Reporters invaded the quiet street where Melita Norwood lived. Cameras aimed at her door. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, unable to reconcile the kind figure who offered them marmalade at Christmas with the Soviet spy in the headlines. She was always very polite, a neighbor said. Did she really work for the Russians? That morning, Melita opened the door with the calm of someone who has awaited this moment all her life. She stepped into the garden with a cup of tea in her hands and regarded the swarm of journalists with a mix of curiosity and weariness. They asked dozens of questions at once. She waited for the noise to subside, looked into the cameras, and said in a clear voice, "I helped the Russians because they deserved to know what others already knew." For a few seconds, no one replied. Then the questions multiplied. Were you a communist? Do you regret it? How do you feel knowing you betrayed your country? She merely shrugged. I did not betray my country, she replied. I betrayed an unjust secret. Her words, simple and direct, shot through the United Kingdom like a jolt. For some, it was a traitor's confession. For others, the quiet defense of an idealist. Editorials split. The more conservative called for prison, even if only symbolic. The more liberal portrayed her as a woman who had acted on principle. The government, however, remained silent. MI5 issued no statements, and the Prime Minister confirmed there would be no trial. The case is closed, a spokesperson said. The press baptized her with a name that mixed fondness and scandal. The Granny Spy. In the days that followed, cameras trailed her through the neighborhood streets, at the market buying fruit, at the library returning history books. She never changed her routine or hid. She smiled at the curious, answered politely, and returned to her domestic life as if it were a passing exaggeration. In later interviews, she repeated the same idea again and again. I did not do it for money. I did it because I believed that helping the Soviet Union would help keep the peace. The Russians had a right to know what other countries were planning. She did not seek absolution, nor repentance. To her, the public trial was just another form of noise. She had lived too long in silence to fear words. Television showed images of an elderly woman watering flowers in her garden while reporters waited at the gate. In those images, the country discovered something unsettling. Treason could have a kind face, and history could hide for half a century behind a polite smile and a teapot. Melita Norwood did not ask forgiveness or offer excuses. She left only a phrase that, like all she spoke, sounded more like reflection than defense. I did not change sides. I changed my idea of what it meant to be just. No one could deny that with her acts she had altered the century's course. And though decades had made her fragile, her voice kept a conviction that neither governments nor time had managed to break. In the summer of 2005, Melita Norwood's life faded with the same discretion with which it had unfolded. She was 93. She died in her house in Bexley Heath, surrounded by books, papers, and rose bushes she had planted with her own hands. There were no official funerals or headlines. The world, busy with new wars and new fears, hardly noticed her passing. She never sought money, fame, or exile. Unlike so many agents who changed loyalty or identity, Melita stayed in the same place, among the same streets and the same habits. She was a spy who never fled and a traitor who never hid. Deep down, she always saw herself as an ordinary citizen who did what she thought necessary to keep the peace. Seen with modern eyes, her story is a contradiction. She helped a regime that committed atrocities, but did so moved by an idea of balance that, in her mind, was synonymous with justice. Her faith in equality led her to serve a system that did not practice it. Her silence protected a cause that no longer existed. And yet, within that contradiction lived her truth. Espionage, in her case, was not measured in betrayals, but in invisible loyalties. She was not a woman of ambitions, but of convictions. She sought neither power nor revenge, but a way to counter the world's unequal weight. Her acts were neither heroic nor infamous. They were human. Today, with time's distance, her story lingers like an echo. The empires she worked for and conspired against have vanished, but her name keeps appearing in history books and intelligence archives, reminding us that espionage is not always written with bullets or treachery, but with quiet convictions. In the gardens of Bexley Heath, the wind still moves the leaves of the roses she planted. No one looks at them, no one mentions them. But in that murmur, her voice still seems to float, serene, stubborn, unbreakable. I only did what I believed was right. And with those words, the 20th century closes one of its strangest and most human chapters, a story without gunshots or chases, where treason blurred with faith and justice with doubt. The tale of a woman who, between loyalty and conscience, chose the latter.